which I really hate, but. Okay, so I have some images. I have some images of student work from previous semesters. This was actually from the first time I taught the class.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was a good piece.
Yeah.
So remember, like I said, not a comprehensive Photoshop demo. Everybody works their own sort of way in Photoshop. It's one of these programs that's complex enough that you can do everything kind of 8 different ways. So if you know something here and I'm not doing this the way you know, it's okay. It is, it's just how that works. So I like to just right-click on stuff and say open with Photoshop. It's how I get moving with it. I like how fast these new Macs go too, man. It just blows my mind every time. So I'm here in Photoshop. I like to have my history tab open and my adjustment layers area open here. So you can see this is an installation shot from the gallery space. And this is a painting that is done on gessoed paper towels with tassels sewn in. It was a pretty intense piece. It was a nice piece. But you can see this is, it's a great piece. The photograph is not quite ready for display on website or portfolio. So we need to do a couple of things, and mainly on this one is crop and white balance it. White balance it? I shouldn't say it with the H, should I? White. White balance it. So we're going to crop it a little bit first. So, like I said, not comprehensive. Over here's your toolbar on the left side of the screen. These are all. And this is in case you don't know Photoshop at all. Left side of the screen. These are your toolbars. These are what you manipulate the stuff in the middle of the screen with. So we're going to find the crop tool. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down. We're going to select that. You're going to see it put those bars around your piece. So you're going to drag those in, and it's going to let you kind of find that area. Now, when you're cropping for documentation, you really just want it to be comfortable. Okay? You don't want the edge to be too tight to the work or too open and empty space. You just want a nice, even kind of space around the work. Okay? So something like this would be fine. You're going to find that crop and then hit the return key, and boom, you are cropped. All right? Now, there are a lot of ways to white balance things. So white balancing refers to when you're shooting a picture, you have all these different lights running around. Like in here, we have these fluorescents, we have a little bit of sunlight coming in, we have the warm spotlights, and we have the monitor. We have all these different light sources in here. Now, Liz showed you guys how to shoot your work with kind of spots on it. That is a nice kind of even light source, but that has a temperature to it. All these have different color temperatures to them, and they affect your work in different ways. Modern cameras try to adjust. They try to guess what is supposed to be white in the picture and sort of adjust it. iPhones do a lot of that. But they're not always right, and they're not always as crisp as you want it or as white, so there's usually a little warm, a little cool, something like that. So we need to fix that. The most important part of this, though, is when you have a grouping of images, especially of the same piece, let's say zoomed in, cropped, or installation shots, you want them to look like they're in the same group. Some shouldn't be warm, shouldn't be cool. So all this stuff has to match. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, we're going to tell Photoshop what we think is white, and it's going to try and adjust that to to make those really white in the program. Okay, does that make sense what I just said there? So we select a pixel in the picture. Photoshop says, oh, that's what you want to be white. I will adjust all the colors in relationship to that. Now, what the computer does is it runs some kind of algorithm. That's where the magic happens. And it adjusts everything in relationship to that. And there's a bunch of different algorithms it can run. So if we go to up here to the image menu, this is where we can control things that relate to the entire image, okay, not single layers or not sort of specific things. And you see we have all these things like auto tone, auto contrast, auto color. We have adjustments you can make to the image like brightness, contrast, levels, curves, exposure. These are all ways of kind of changing properties of this image. And they all do it in slightly different ways. So if we grab an exposure adjustment on here, you're going to see we can come in and bump it up so that it looks like it's overexposed or underexposed. We can change the offset, it sort of changes the contrast colors, sort of the midtones, and then the gamma correction was sort of the lower tones. But this also has these three little droppers over here. And if we hover over them, we can kind of see what they are. The sample an image to set the white point. So that is the white balancing dropper. So what we do is we select that thing, and we come over here. We know this wall should be white. And we're going to click on that, and if you watch, all of a sudden it brightened that up just a bit. Okay, so that took that pixel that I clicked on, sort of made it white. That's one way to do it. So that's a very kind of simple white balancing, thing. I didn't say it. So when you do that, you have to go to, excuse me, a long day. Let's go back and hit that again. Grab a white pixel, brighten it up. You have to hit OK on that to set that. What you want to watch out for when you're doing this with some of these things is that if you do it too much or you grab the wrong thing, some of the detail can get lost. And that's kind of the biggest issue with making adjustments to your work, is that you don't want to blow out any of the details. And what I mean by that is if I adjust that too much, you can see, watch as I bump the exposure. Look at the detail in the tassels. All of a sudden, it's gone, okay? And that's what we don't want. We got to find that right balance of kind of brightness, whiteness, and detail. So now I said I had a little new something I was going to show you. So like there are a number of these little white balancing droppers in the program. I'm going to step back here. So this is the unbalanced one. If I go into adjustments, there is, if I do a curves thing, I got to be honest with you, I'm not a digital photo person per se. I'm a new media sculpture person, so I don't know how to use the curves slider. I know that you move it around, it changes it in relationship to all the data in the image. But they also have the white balancing down here. If I select that, I could come up and kind of adjust it. But you can see it does it differently, right? It runs a different algorithm. So I discovered this last night. If you could run this curves algorithm, but there's a little trick to it. So, and you can do this with a adjustment layer as well. If you don't know what an adjustment layer is, it is an image adjustment that lives on its own layer, so you're not really losing the data in your original image. So if I put a curves adjustment layer, you can see down here on the right, it adds its own layer. Now this is the trick part. So I can come up here, there's an auto button that will adjust the curve and it'll try to make the image better. And if I click that, it does something, but it's not quite right. The wall, it brightened the pinks up, the wall's a little bit kind of off-white, maybe a real red. So let's go step back. If you come in with the option key, this is why I'm recording this, by the way, because it's easier to just say it than write it out. And I hit the option key on the Mac and hit auto, it's going to bring up this menu, the auto color correction options. So this is the algorithm it uses to do the color correction. And if we select fine, dark, and light colors, and then snap the natural midtones, that's going to give us a much more balanced, bright, nicely evened out white balanced image. Do you guys see that? See what I did there? It looks a little weird on that screen, by the way. It looks better on the computer.
It does look better on you.
Yeah, and it actually, from what I've seen, it does a good job of keeping the detail and giving me a version of this that really is what it looks like in my brain. And that's important to think about. So when you look at these, use your eyes. Think, does this look like my piece? That's the important part. You know, if it looks not quite right, then make it look like your piece. Don't count the computer to do it for you. Be the judge of it yourself. But I remember this piece, and this looks a little bit more like it, and it's nice, even, white balanced piece. So let me do that again, just so you remember. So we add a curves adjustment layer. You can do this from the other one too, but it's easier to get rid of if you do it with the adjustment layer. Find the auto button, option click the auto button. Make sure you select fine, dark, and light colors and snap neutral midtones. Okay, so what that does is it white balances the lights, evens out the darks and the midtones, and then looks nice. I can show you another example. I'm going to show you how to export this. Then I'm going to go through and show you one more example that has some straightening involved as well, and it's more of a 3D piece. All right, we've edited. It looks like it does in your brain, like you remember it, like it should look. Maybe it looks better in here than it does in real life now. That happens to a lot of art. We need to export this out. So we're going to go to File. We're going to go to Export, and you get all these options here. We're going to go to Export As. Second one down. That is going to calculate this. Now, if I just exported it with the default export as settings, it's going to give me an image. I think I took this with my DSLR. A 3850 by 4510. It's way bigger than Michael wants for the website. It's also 28.7 megabytes. This will slow down your phone or your computer. We need to change this. So the first thing we're going to do is change the format. So we're going to kind of work our way down this menu here. We're going to change this to JPEG. Michael already told us, he said if they submit a PNG image, I'm just not going to do anything with it. It just won't be on the website. Okay? So you're going to select JPEG.
Follow the instructions
Yes.
clearly.
Got to be JPEG. We're going to look over here now in our attributes. It's only 5.3 megabytes. That's pretty good. Pretty good reduction in size. Now we got to change the image size, all right? So what we're going to do is we're going to find the bigger of the two numbers. We have width and height. This is 4510 tall by 3850 width. In this case, I want the 2000 to be the largest of the numbers, so I'm going to highlight that and put in 2000 and hit the return key. And that is going to scale that down, in this case, by 44.35% of the original. Now if we look over here, it's 1.1 megabyte. We're much better now. That's actually still a little bit big. We can probably come up here if we want to get that under a megabyte, which is not a rule, but it's something I like to aim for. If I click that down just a little bit, remember this is not your piece. It's just a picture of your piece that probably people will look at on their phone or in a little window on your laptop. It doesn't have to be the best quality in the world. Now we're down to 519 kilobytes. So we're in good shape for that. We're going to go to export. Now this is important. You need to name your image. All right. I like to use, it should be actually last name, first name, and then a number. Okay. So the establishing shot we were talking about earlier, that should be 01. All right? And don't just put your artwork title. Nobody knows who that belongs to. It's got to be your name. We know all these images are of your artwork, the ones you're turning in. So I don't need to know anything about your artwork in the image name. I need to know your name so that it gets with you. So I would put, for this one, I would put Davis _ Brian _ 01. That's just a convention. The underscores, that dates back when computers had problems with spaces in file names. But if everything's the same, it makes it easy for people like Michael to put it all together. And you're going to save it out to where you can find it. In this case, I can put it on my desktop, wherever.
Is the 01 going to be the one they use to sort of link to our name?
To link, that's a good question.
Yeah, I found it.
Probably, but if you want a separate image that, like if you want a detail as your sort of link, maybe we'll, you know, to
Or
the.
even if you just knew which one it was going to be, could be better. If it doesn't have to be that, I'm okay with it. Could we put?
You're right.
thumbnail
You can put
and
thumbnail,
title
yeah.
and maybe thumbnail?
Yeah, you could. So,
You want to make sure a certain image is the establishing image.
Yeah.
yeah. So you can put thumb.
I'll ask Michael. Maybe the first image that you upload should be the establishing, because there's really no difference between the size of that image, where a thumbnail is
Yeah.
smaller, right? So maybe we can just agree with him that the first image that you send is the one that you see, that you click on. That's what you're asking, yes?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
That is a good question.
Because I'm gonna look up really quick what Michael sent us.
So then, and then you'll export that out. So let me bring up a couple other things here.
Oh, he doesn't have the version with the. This is the website though, guys.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
It's cool. So you'll enter into that, and then it'll have everyone's name and images. Yeah.
Oh, let's see.
I'm gonna ask Michael. I'm gonna go interrupt his class. BRB.
So we really can't do PNGs for the website photos?
Why would you want to do PNGs for the website?
Because, well, usually PNGs are better quality compared to a JPEG.
They are, but they're far, far bigger,
Yeah.
usually. You know what I mean? You don't want a whole page full of 28 megabyte images.
Fair, yeah.
That's the deal here. That's why.
It's just for saving space, basically.
For saving time.
And, yeah.
So a couple things to watch out for. I know Liz was talking about this, but if you're one of those folks that has to shoot for installation shots, watch out for things like this. This is an installation shot from that same exhibition. This person needed to turn the pedestal to get a clean backdrop, and it needed to bounce light up in it. See this nasty shadow here? This is really hard to get rid of in Photoshop, and you got all this work to do with this door behind it and this other stuff. So this is not a good shot. This one as well. These are nice pieces, by the way. These are just not good shots. All this glare on here. So these are all things you have to watch out for when you're shooting. So I'm just kind of trying to reinforce that, because it will kind of bite you in the butt when you're rushing to get it done. You don't want to have to deal with that. So I'm going to bring up, let's see, this one. Why does it keep telling me that? Let's take a look at this one here. This is an installation shot. And we're looking here at the table. So the table was somebody's piece that year. Yeah, it was a nice table. We talked about the concept of sort of turning in a piece of furniture as your senior project where you're at, and talked about it in terms of a piece. We didn't ever really quite make a determination on that. But if you notice this shot here, the you guys remember back in your drawing one class doing perspective? You're looking down at the table. Look at the legs of the table are going in. So everything looks like it's sort of moving away from you. Look at the top edge of the photo and the paintings behind them. The pieces behind them aren't really that distracting, but they're not straight. Okay, so we need to adjust that. Now, once again, there's tons of ways to do this. I like to kind of go as simple as possible and also just do something you're familiar with. So I like to, number one, put a grid so I can look at it on there. And you do that by going into the View menu and you go to Show and Grid, and that's going to give me this grid. Actually, you can change the level of the grittiness of that, and I always forget to go in and do it. But that's the first thing I like to do. And the next thing I like to do is then go in and I use the, I like to select all, Command A. And then I go into Edit. Got to make sure my layer's selected. Go to Edit, Transform, and I like to use the Distort. I find it's a little easier for me conceptually to get what I'm doing. And what Distort gives you is these handles, and then you can grab each one and sort of move the image around in relationship to those grids, like that. So when you do this is a little bit dangerous to use, but sometimes it'll change the proportions of the work. That's what you want to watch out for. There are other tools in there that will do what you want. I'm looking at the kind of the issue here is this one and these are diverging that way. So we want to make sure that it's not too bad, go that way. So we can't get the backdrop images perfect, but I can get these legs pretty straight. Okay. So I'm going to adjust that, get it right, make sure I didn't screw my proportions up too much, and then hit the return key. And that's going to set that. Now you notice I got a bit of white space here. I'm just going to crop that out. Let's go to the crop tool. And let's go hide that grid. It's been a while since I taught new media, so I'm a little slower than I used to be. Now I'm going to do a white balance on it. You're going to see a really nice difference on this. Actually, you know what we're going to do before we do that? I haven't talked about retouching at all. If you have anything you need to get rid of, like let's go back to not that one, this one. If you have anything you need to get rid of, it's in the background or something on the wall. Like, oh man, that's on my screen. Like this guy on the wall. You need to retouch that. It's very distracting, kind of hovering over the top of that. For retouching, once again, lots of ways to do it. You want to make it easier on yourself. Come up here and grab the spot, something like the spot healing brush tool. Try this first. It's the most easy thing. I'm going to make sure my layer is unlocked. I'm over here. I can change the size of the paintbrush head by hitting the bracket keys on the keyboard. And then we're going to paint that out. We're going to let the computer work its magic because the computers are getting pretty good at that. and it's going to fix that pretty well. Now, notice I did that twice because there was a little bit of artifacting there where the computer was sort of kind of figuring out what goes there. Now, that works for smaller stuff. If you have any smudges or an outlet or something, that'll usually take care of it. You would not do that to get rid of the door. That would not work. The computer would not know what to put in that space. Eventually, they will. I think probably it's going to be doing that pretty soon. Yeah, the AI stuff. Be like, you just tell it what you want it to do, and it's going to do it. It'll probably be like next month we'll figure out how to do that. Yeah. So spot healing is a good thing to do. Let's go back to this one. Let's take a look at this one. It's white balance, so let's grab that adjustment layer. We're going to grab a curves. We're going to make sure it's on the right one. Fine dark, snap neutral midtones, hit OK. So that, we can now look at the difference of this. That one is kind of muddy and dim. That one's got a nice kind of snap to it. Now, if you find it's too much, the other thing you can do because you're using an adjustment layer, you can come up right in here in the layers panel and you can drop the opacity on that a little bit if you want to dial that back just a touch. Like that. Okay, so when you're working on a group of images, and this will be the last bit, I think, there is a tool. Let's see how this works. I'm going to open up. Let's try. Let's see. I'm trying to think if I don't have two versions of any one piece. So I'm going to bring up, let's see what happens. I should never do this live. Let's take a look at the difference between this one and that one. If we look at the wall, I don't know, this is not going to work. But I'm going to try it anyway, see what happens. We can do this thing called match color. So if I go into the second one, the unedited one, and I go to image, adjustments, and match color, I am going to leave these set to their defaults at the moment. So this is the one I want to match to something else. So the target is this one, this image. I'm going to come down here to the source and select the other one, which would be the Malin Proctor.
That's how you get them to match?
Yeah, but actually in this one it's matching the original, not the edited one, because I didn't flatten the image.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know that.
So if we look, so it matched. So unfortunately, I didn't save that out. But if they were set, you can see that it sort of matches that tone.
Yep.
So if I go in here and let's go up to image and layer, flatten image.
Good to know.
Whoops. I gotta select that. Image, layer, flatten image. Now it's one piece. So what I've done there, flatten the image. I've set those things in stone. I can't undo that once I'm out of Photoshop. If I go back to here, let's go back to the original. Let's do the match color adjustments, match color. We're going to select Madeline's piece. It's not quite right because it's not the same lights. But I can show you how this does work on two pieces that are the same. So if I do this one, let's open another instance of this one. All right, I'm going to mess it up and then match it. let's do a hue saturation. Let's put it, let's make it a little purple. We're gonna flatten this image. All right, so now this image is purple. And that is the full edited version. If I come back to the original one, let's see what happens when I go to this one and say match. Image adjustments, match color. And the full edited one. All right. So what it does is it tries to grab that that color. So you have to adjust. You have to adjust to that. This demo is not going very well. This part. It will work better if you have different shots of the same piece under the same lighting. All right, it'll work better. It won't be
I think
perfect.
it makes sense.
Yeah, it's
You get
doing
it.
its best. So the computer's trying to figure out. The computer doesn't know what we're looking at. It doesn't yet. The AI thing will figure that out. But right now, Photoshop really doesn't know kind of what we want. It's doing its best to kind of guess. All right, but it's one thing to try. If you have a batch of 9 photos, you can try the match color and see if that gets them close to the same look for you. Does that make sense to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
It's all right. So we have straightening using the edit transform tools, and that'd be a good thing. You can kind of play with those tools and see what they do. I like to use the distort, but you can also kind of use some of the other ones. We have white balancing. Once again, you can try the curves, the auto, and tell the auto what to do by option clicking on it or alt clicking if you're on a PC. And then exporting by going to File, Export As, making sure JPEG is selected, making sure the 2000 is the longest dimension, and checking the size over here on the left. And naming your work. Any questions about this?
Not if you've not decided what to call it and it's still untitled.
Titles are important, but here I'm going to
really
stop
bad
the
at them.
recording.
I'm really bad at titles. So what I do